Now we come to Cathleen Schine's The Grammarians. Without question, no question at all, this is the book I had the most fun reading over the last 3.5 months. It's witty and it's sharp, and there are laugh aloud parts and passages that make you shake your head at how clever they are. This is Cathleen Schine's 11th novel. You will know her as a New York stringer. She writes for the New York Times almost every edition. This is just the cleverest of books. It's the tale of two identical female twins who are language obsessed, the grammarians, grammar, language obsessed since birth. They share in their cribs a mysterious private language that even their parents can't decode. They develop a very early fascination with obscure words and proper English usage. They prize, above all, their favorite possession, which their father gifted to both of them. And he's an adoring father. He's a mathematician. He's an accountant. He can't imagine his daughter's obsession with English language, but he goes along with it and buys them the great, big, thick, expensive, heavy Webster New International Dictionary. And he brings it home not by itself, but with a huge stand that becomes a sort of an altar. And the children worship on the altar of the dictionary. It becomes their Bible. It is positioned in a place of privilege in their lives, but also in their household. As toddlers, their favorite music comes from My Fair Lady, of course. You know, why can't the English teach their children how to speak? And words, 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 all I hear is words. That soundtrack plays all day long in their house to their mother's absolute, she becomes absolutely obsessed that they shouldn't be playing it anymore. They love obscure multisyllabic words. They play with those as people play with Ken and Barbie dolls. They shoot and get shot at each other, not with balls and bows and arrows, but with wordplay. They become absolutely brilliant at puns. They delight at getting off clever quips about people they see, zingers. They amuse each other with their zingers, and of course they're amusing the readers all the time. They delight in solemnly announcing, and they both do this, whenever anyone deigns to imagine they have decided which twin is which, whomever is told that says, no, I'm the other one, thus taking the wind out of everybody's sails. Born in the early 1960s in New York City, Laurel is precisely 17 minutes older than Daphne. But their names are Laurel and Daphne, interchangeable, of course, because they both come from Greek mythology, where the nymph Daphne was, of course, changed into, transformed into a laurel tree. So their names are actually the same. And they're inseparable. They're inseparable in their cribs as toddlers, through public school, through high school, all the way through university. They share clothes. When they graduate from university, they share a small walk-up apartment on the Lower East Side. They begin to wonder as they live the same routine with each other. They share the routines of their lives, and they wonder, what is our adult relationship actually going to be if our life change and we go down other paths? And where do I end and where do I begin, thinks Laurel. Or maybe it's Daphne who says, where do I begin and where do I end so you begin? And no one has ever sure which one has said either thing. In other words, they fear what would happen if they were separated. Each of them thinks truly she will probably forever share her whole life experience with her twin. But when they marry, and of course it is a double wedding, you would expect nothing else, would you? And they go their separate ways, then it's Laurel who says to her husband, "With you, I can be myself and only myself. I can be my very own me when I'm with you." As in all stories of identical twins, there's the wonderful scene, of course, where, laughing all the way, the sisters deliberately exchange identities. This happens for a day when they swap jobs. Daphne, pretending to be Laurel, arrives at the kindergarten where Laurel is teaching. And she does a wonderful job. The children are delighted with all the new things she's coming up with. Laurel, as Daphne, gravitates to the copy desk of the magazine where an apprentice Daphne is working as a copy editor. But she makes herself so interesting to the copy editors that she ultimately paves the way for her sister to leave the receptionist desk and become ultimately the chief copy editor of the magazine. In neither workplace does anyone know that the switch has taken place. "You are a better me than I am," Laurel says to her twin. "But I am a better you than you are." Inevitably, when they take different paths, rivalry begins. Competitiveness grows. It sharpens. They feud publicly at family events, and then they feud even more publicly in print. Laurel goes into motherhood, and Daphne becomes a very high-profile columnist. Her column is called The People's Pedant, and she is ultimately hired by the New York Times as a staff writer. "I am a professional language scold," she says proudly of herself when talking about the several best-selling books that she's written about language and about proper usage. And the examples of that proper usage are wonderful. There's one point where she's scolding someone about saying, he uses the expression, "about 10 women came." And she says, how can it be about 10 women? 9.5 women, 9.75 women? Use language the way it should be used. Eventually, Laurel becomes involved when her daughter goes off to nursery school in the archives in the public library. And there she finds old World War I letters written home. And she discovers the language of people who have not been taught proper usage and the richness with which they have infused the language with all kinds of phrases and idiomatic sayings. And she begins to understand that there is a popular language at work too. And so she rivals her sister's pedantry, but good pedantry, with her discovery that there is a colloquial street language that needs to be acknowledged as well as the elegance of using proper English. Eventually, she becomes a poet and an acclaimed writer as well. It becomes a very public feud between the two sisters as they rival each other in rival columns and in rival books and so on. There is a delightful cast of quirky supporting characters, gently satirized, every single one of them, and they add to this comic thread that runs right through the novel. But the focus remains on Laurel and Daphne and their unbroken love and relationship with language. And the question arises, and not satirically, on the death of both of their parents. which one of them is going to inherit the Webster Dictionary that they both prize as the greatest possession in their lives. The novel's epigram at the front reminds us that the word twin actually has two meanings. And Webster's dictionary gives as the most used meaning, of course, the noun. And the noun means, and I'm quoting now from Webster Dictionary, a pair, a couple. But there is also the use of the word twin as a verb, to part, to sunder, to separate. Not so often used, but the usage is there. Throughout the Grammarians, author Cathleen Schine extends her affection, I think her wit, her intellect, very evenly to each of the sisters. And we extend our gratitude to Cathleen Schine for this utterly delightful, engaging literary romp. It's just the book you need in these days of solitude and lack of contact. Thank you so much for being here with me in my kitchen. Thank you for listening as I spoke about books I have so much enjoyed in the last 3.5 months. And I certainly hope that some of them will become your favorites too.